Hello, WestJet Pilots and other podcast listeners, and welcome to this edition of PIREP, the WestJet Pilots podcast. I'm your host again today, Captain Desmond Jordan, and as usual, joined in the sound booth by the wizard of sound, Captain Chris Von Jones. He'd say hello, but he doesn't have a microphone. We are actually recording this episode from the MEC meeting that's taking place in Winnipeg, and as a result, we have an abundance of riches of committee chairs and committee members here. Today, we are joined by the chair of the Pro Standards Committee and also one of the committee members. We have Captain Kristin Long and also Captain Al Marshall. Kristin, I'm going to start with you. If you could just give us a little introduction of who you are and how long you've been at WestJet and how things are going in your aviation career, we'd appreciate it.
Sure, yeah. I am a Winnipeg-based captain since we opened the base in October. I've been at WestJet for 20 years now. Started off in the Calgary base on the NG, and I've been on the 737 my 20 years here. I've been a captain for 16 years, and about a year and a half ago, I started facilitating the command course in Calgary.
Yep, okay. So we're a similar vintage, around the 20-year.
Yeah.
And Al, how about you? How long have you been here, and what's a little bit of your aviation history?
Good to see you, Des.
It's good to see you. We have some history, by the way.
We do have
Al
history, and it goes back a fair ways, but it's all good. Been at WestJet for, I'm in my 22nd year now, and been flying commercially for 34, which makes me feel really, really old. Mm-hmm. Been chair of the ProStans committee now since the beginning of COVID, and a member of ProStans since its inception, probably about 4 years ago. Okay. 4 or 5 years ago. And been facilitating the human factors, CRM, EPT, recurrent ground school off and on for about 8 years now, and back in the fold with the command course for the last year and a half, and line training and checking for the better part of 15 years now. So I seem to have my thumb in a bit of everything. But
I will say, I remember when they were putting different committees together and some names were rolling around about who was going to chair what committees and who was going to be doing different things, and your name came up for Pro Standards, and immediately in my mind I was like, that's the guy. They got the right guy. With that in mind, can you tell us, our listeners here, what is it that Pro Standards actually is? What do they actually do?
So ProStans, in its simplest form, is we're pretty much a mediation service. When we have discrepancies between pilots and flight attendants, CSAs, whoever it might be, we, rather than go through MLOs and the company side, I think we all agree that having a peer talk to you is far more impactful than any sort of management level person, and that's where we've been so far. We've had probably in the last 3 years, just any of the cases that we've dealt with have been organically driven from the pilot group, and a lot of that referred from our LEC members, the few people that listened to the original podcast a couple of years ago and knew about us or have heard about us some other way. Just recently, we've been very fortunate, and I have to give a lot of credit to John Aaron and Jimmy Dean and Suzanne Foray that we've had a bit of a breakthrough on the company side. There was a lot of concern from WestJet Legal about what we were doing and how we were doing it, and they kind of forced the issue, and we've got a good relationship with the flight ops team as far as that level of trust for passing things over. And in the meantime, we're dealing with more of a cooperative start to it, but things are now going to get referred to us.
Okay. Now, I was wondering, Kristin, could I ask you if you could give me an example, a broad example, nothing specific, of a Pro Standards sort of case?
An example of a pro standards case would be two pilots out on the line flying, and for one reason or another, they're not getting along. Somebody has reacted in a way that was unexpected, and now it's uncomfortable, and this pilot isn't sure that they're comfortable flying with this person, say, continuing on to day 3 and 4, or if they see them on their schedule again in the future. We want to mitigate these issues so that nobody feels like, oh, geez, I'm flying with this person again. I might book off, right? We don't want any of those kinds of sentiments. We want to create a professional atmosphere in the flight deck where everybody can work together.
Okay. Any cases come to mind that stick out in your head, Al?
The one that comes up, and actually I refer to it in the command course a lot, is one just where, we had an FO who contacted us because he felt like he just wasn't connecting, and he's feeling very isolated in the flight deck. And ultimately, it just came down to different personalities and different communication styles. And it's not that either individual was doing anything wrong; they just couldn't bridge the gap between their personality styles. And we gave them, we actually put them in contact with each other. And the captain was he felt very bad about it. It's like, no, I give him my number and we'll go out for a beer and we'll talk this out, because it was certainly no intent in any way, shape, or form. And a lot of the time, that's all it is. It's just a matter of helping these people facilitate the conversation to a successful outcome in future, so that they can comfortably fly together in the future.
So it's like an opportunity to clear up a miscommunication or a misunderstanding that may be imperceived, but when brought to the attention of either one of the parties, there's a opportunity for person-to-person resolution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's normal for people to lack self-awareness and not be aware of how their actions and their energy is being perceived by other people in a negative light. So.
Not airline pilots. That can't be.
It happens.
Yeah, it's interesting. So it sounds like a great program. What is some of the history of this program? Like, how far back does this program go in aviation?
So ProStans is actually the very first committee that was stood up under the pilot assistance umbrella, and I think it goes back to 1953. So it has a very long history. One of the things of working with the other major airlines, the American Airlines through ALPA, is being able to see how a mature relationship works. Like, for example, Delta, they've got their 16,000 pilots, and virtually everything, unless it is federally regulated complaints such as sexual harassment or something like that, where it has very defined process, everything goes straight from their base chief pilot to ProStans. That is their first step. And it's only if it can't be successfully resolved through ProStans does it go back to the chief pilot's office and HR to be dealt with that way. So it's a very mature relationship, and it's a relationship that's based on trust for both sides.
Okay.
We're lucky the committee has, here at WestJet, we've got a very good relationship with the MLO team, who will be our main contact as far as having cases referred to us and dealt with. And the trust starts with them in the sense that they have the trust that we'll deal with it equitably. It's not just something that's being swept under the rug. And when we finish with the case and we call them back and say it's been successfully dealt with, there's no fishing for information about what happened or how it's been resolved, just that it's been resolved.
Sitting here listening to this, I have a level of comfort as a pilot knowing that, hey, if there is some sort of a conflict, because, Kristin, as you said, it's not uncommon for there to be miscommunications or misunderstandings between people, individuals, let alone when you're sitting next to somebody in a tiny room for multiple hours. It's good to know that there's a layer of insulation between what might happen in a given situation and before it might have to go to, quote, the company, as it were, an opportunity for essentially pilots to resolve it amongst themselves. Because you guys are all pilots, obviously, and the people that would be involved are pilots, and that's part of the resolution process. I'm wondering, how would you say that this program is working here at WestJet?
So far, it's working well. Again, it's in the previous 3 years, really, since we've been active. Our cases have all been organic from the pilot group. And now with this next step with the company starting to refer things for us, I certainly see them becoming more active as a committee, and getting the awareness of who we are and what we do out there is becoming even more important with the potential or with the looming Sunwing merger. And having those avenues for pilots to contact us and whether they want us to become involved in a specific instance or whether they just want information about how to deal with a situation that they're unsure of.
Okay. I'm sure there'll be no shortage of opportunities for conflicts to be resolved in the future. Question for you, Kristin. What sort of training is involved to become a committee member of ProStans?
So I went down to Florida in February for the Fast 101 course and ProStans first level course. So I took a 2-day course, as well as I'd been facilitating the command course with Al for about a year before I joined ProStans. And we talk a lot about communication styles, leadership, communication, and so tied in perfectly with this position here with ProStans. Okay.
How many other members are on the ProStans team?
So we have 2 other members. There's Ginny Slivens out of Toronto base. She's a captain in Toronto. And Christina Detmers, and she's a Calgary captain.
Okay.
So we have a good range across the country for representation as well.
Excellent. One thing that I've noticed in what you've mentioned here is it's good to see representation of both men and women on that committee because, aviation was, for a long time has been a male-dominated issue. And I can imagine it being very difficult for a woman flying in aviation who has a conflict with a male pilot to be able to say, it might be difficult to broach some of those subjects but the idea or the understanding that, hey, there are men and women on this ProStans team, just like there are men and women in our flight operations department, that's a big deal, and that's important to know.
Yeah, it's common for people to have these, strong held beliefs, and we're not going to be able to change people's beliefs. But if what we can do is try to bring 2 people that have different beliefs together into a small space, like you said earlier, the flight deck is a pretty small office. And if we can get people to align themselves to recognize that we have a professional duty to do as pilots and that we can find common ground and get through the day and work compatibly together through that time.
Absolutely. Most definitely. Al, you're going to say something?
I think we need to talk about one of the things that is cornerstone to all our ProStans documentation and referrals is our code of ethics and tenets. We talk about being professionals, professional pilots, but very rarely do we ever try and define what that is. And if we take a couple of minutes and look at the ALPA code of ethics and tenets, it defines it right there. It defines our obligations to the profession, primarily our company. Our respective companies, we have an obligation to them. We've all agreed to the policies of the respective companies, especially some of the things that we get referred to that we can't deal with, the respect in the workplace policies, drug and alcohol policies. Those are all things that we have to abide by. And that's all part of being a professional within our respective companies. And that's something that we need to hang our hat on. So when we talk about being professional, what is it? It's all defined right there for us.
How's this pilot group doing, Al? What do you think when you look at our pilot group? Are we doing a good job?
I think overall we're very fortunate to have a very professional pilot group. We've got a very diverse group, so we've got a lot of different mindsets that have come to the company, and that's great because we nobody wants to work as a robot in a homogenous environment. The importance is coming back to our SOPs and flying the way that we're supposed to be flying and behaving how we're supposed to be behaving, and but incorporating our past history and experiences in that.
So once a pilot has initiated the process with ProStandards, what can they expect?
Once you've entered into the process and you've made contact with a ProStans member, one of the things that we'll go over the process with you. First and foremost is confidentiality. If there's a breach on confidentiality from us, we know that the saying we use, if you breach confidentiality, the phone stops ringing, and that's the last thing we want. So absolutely, there's no written records. We can't use emails or texts for phone numbers and names. Everything over the phone, handwritten. Any written records we have by convention have to be destroyed within 90 days of finishing up the respective case. From the pilot point, that there is no anonymity. And we often say that this is about facilitating the adult conversations. Ian Fraser used to talk about his courageous conversations. And we recognize that a lot of these things are sensitive and they have the potential to go sideways. So we're there to help facilitate and start the conversation about how to have those conversations so we have a meaningful resolution at the end.
So when you say there's no anonymity, can you expand on that, Kristin?
Yeah, so we receive the report and we'll have the reporter's name and contact information. So we'll give that person a call directly. We'll hear their series of events, their story, what their concerns are. And at the end of that conversation, we will ask for their permission. Say, we are going to contact the person that you flew with, that had the conflict with, and we are just requesting your permission to call them and to advise you that I will be telling them who made the complaint, who had the concern. So it can't stay anonymous. This has to be full transparency across the board.
So both parties involved will know who each other is.
That's right. The person who contacts ProStans will have their contact information and we'll reach out to them and have the conversation. And once we hear their story, what happened, we will ask and just verify with them that we have their permission to contact the person that they've had this issue with. It has to be full transparency. It can't remain anonymous because that's not how resolution works. You can't hide behind a wall.
Right.
You have to be an adult and step up, and we are the mediator to help resolve this conflict.
And both parties need to have a fulsome understanding of what the issues that are being contested actually are.
That's right. We are the neutral party. We're not there to pick a side and, then try to coach the other person because we're just taking their side. We need to hear the other person's experience as well and come to some common middle ground with the two.
So we know who you guys are. We know what your committee does. Could you tell us what your committee is not?
Well, as we were just joking, we're not your mom. We're not gonna hunt you down and tell you need a haircut or your shirt needs ironing or you need to polish your shoes. We're not the P2P team.
That's me and my team.
And a very well-respected member of the team. One of the things that we do, as I won't say as a consequence, but as part of our role, is we're also a bit of a triage team. When we receive a case and we start delving into it if we suspect that there's more underlying the issue. If we suspect there's a personal issue, something going on in this person's life that's outside of our wheelhouse, we'll refer that to John Potter and the pilot assistance team. Conversely, if we suspect there's even something further with a substance issue, we'll get Ian Gracie and his team at Pilot Recovery involved. And ultimately, and I think through so many of, like most of the teams under the ALPA umbrella, is that we're here to help, and it might not be our prime focus to deal with your issue, but we can always refer you to the appropriate committee or people that can give you the resources that you need.
So a couple times throughout our conversation, I noticed you guys both mentioned that you were involved in the command course. How has that evolved over time, and where is that at now?
So the command course now is intended to run at the beginning of your upgrade process, not 12 to 18 months after you've been online as a captain. So
because that was happening previously.
It happened for my entire career here at WestJet. That's the way it was going. It was a little bit sort of like the MBA program. You get out there, get your world experience, and then come back, we'll give you a course. And too often pilots said, wow, I sure would have liked to have had this course before getting online as a captain. So they took that back to the office, and the training department said, we're going to load it at the front end of the upgrade process, and we've been getting really great feedback.
That seems highly rational.
Yeah.
Highly rational. That's excellent. It's good to hear. It's good to hear that that's evolving and things are moving along in a positive sense there. Guys, great information given here today. Great to know that your committee exists. If a pilot were to have a set of circumstances where they thought that they needed ProStans, how would they start that process?
The best way, like so many of the ALPA committees, the best way to reach us is via DART for tracking, and that will go directly to the members of the ProStans team. The other way is via the ALPA app. We have an email address there, and that, again, will confidentially go to the members of the team to be dealt with as soon as possible.
It's important to note when you're filing ProStans DART, don't put in a lot of sensitive information. Just a short statement that gives us an overview of the situation is all that we need. We want to try to keep as much of sensitive information offline.
Oh, that's good. So it gives, as a pilot, it gives me peace of mind to know that, anything is sensitive information that I have is not being stored somewhere or being held back that could be used against me or anything like that. So,
as was mentioned earlier, we don't keep any online records of the details that was discussed over the phone. And at the end of the resolution period, or maximum at the 90-day mark, we destroy all of the written records, so nothing is traceable.
Very good to know. Well, Al, Kristin, it was great to have you here today. Some really useful information, again, for our pilots. Thank you for coming in and sharing that with us today. I'll take the opportunity to wrap things up from the MEC meeting here in Winnipeg. So once again, everybody, I'd just like to say to you all, read your communications, stay informed, wear your lanyards. Most importantly, be safe. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of PIREP, the WestJet Pilots Podcast.